This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
We'll bring you the latest from Mogadishu following this Saturday blast that left at least 79 people dead. Opposition surrounds Turkey's plan to deploy troops to Libya. And an affordable and innovative solution for hair extensions. This is CGTN. Welcome to Africa Live with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program, Sudan's transitional government to remove fuel subsidies gradually in 2020. And Egypt creates the world's largest coffee cup portrait with a Tutankhamun. We start the broadcast in Somalia, where the government spokesman has just confirmed that the death toll from a car bomb attack has risen to 79 people. 149 people have been injured, and students account for many of the casualties. The country's prime minister said the government would airlift any victims who could not receive help in Somalia. CGTN's Ashtatal has the latest. Today's bombing has drawn worldwide condemnation. Somalia's allies and neighbors have rallied around the country. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, a spokesperson, condemned the attacks. Stefan Dujarric said the Secretary General reiterates the full commitment of the United Nations to support the people and government of Somalia in their pursuit of peace and development. The country's neighbor Kenya also sent a supporting statement through its foreign ministry. The country's foreign minister stated that Kenya remains steadfast in its solidarity with Somalia in the fight against terrorism. Other international bodies like the African Union, IGAD, and the EU joined the condemnation of the bombing. The United States, the United Arab Emirates, Djibouti, and Qatar were among the countries standing in solidarity with Somalia. Well, let's go now to Libya, where Turkey's plans to deploy troops is eliciting reactions from the region. The Speaker of the Eastern-based Parliament, Aguila Saleh, together with his Cypriot counterpart, Dimitris Siloris, have termed Turkey's offer as unacceptable and unwarranted meddling in the international affairs of Libya. The two also said President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's plans will just but add tension and destabilize the entire region. Cyprus and Greece have been having a long-drawn maritime border dispute with Turkey over gas deposits. The dispute has drawn in Libya's government of national accord. The Tripoli-based administration recently signed deals with Ankara on military cooperation and the Mediterranean maritime border.
We reject this agreement between the Union government and Turkey because it flouts international maritime law and the Vienna Convention signed in 1969, which stipulates that we can cancel this agreement if it contradicts a fundamental rule of domestic law. This agreement also contradicts the terms of the Libyan constitution, which stipulates that any agreement must be approved by parliament, and this is the case throughout the world.
Meanwhile, the Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte says his government is opposed to foreign military deployment in Libya, but he is pushing for a political solution instead. He also said the Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio will soon return to Tripoli to negotiate a possible cessation of hostilities between the warring factions. Conte earlier spoke to the Turkish president on phone on the unfolding situation in Libya.
La mia conversazione col presidente Erdogan.
As far as my conversation with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is concerned, I was made aware of a government and a president who believes he has to give support to the government of national accord, to the Sarraj government, and therefore believes he has to help and give military help and support against the offensive of General Haftar. Obviously, I implored President Erdogan to think carefully about a military intervention on the ground, because I told him that such an intervention would not help at all to rebalance the forces on the ground, but would, on the contrary, give way to an incredible military escalation.
U.S. President Donald Trump and the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi agreed on a phone call on Thursday that they should reject a foreign exploitation in Libya. He urged parties to the conflict to take urgent steps to resolve the fighting. CGTN's Yasser Hakim looks at the developments in the North African nation during the year and expectations for 2020.
2019 saw an escalation of the conflict in Libya instead of the hopes for peace. The main development is the war launched by Libyan National Army, led by Khalifa Haftar, to take control of the capital Tripoli and rid the country of terrorism. Haftar's arch-foe, Faiz al-Sarraj, has managed to keep hold of the capital Tripoli, aided by militias in the city and his ally, the Turkey's Tayyip Erdogan. Erdogan has been supplying the government of national accord with arms. He has also promised to send troops in the first week of January.
Fayez Sarraj and the National Court's continuous demands for foreign intervention is prolonging the conflict and will create a bloodbath, as UN envoy Ghassan Salama said. Turkey has supported terrorist groups in Syria and Yemen. Doing the same in Libya will destroy any hopes of a peaceful solution.
The Arab League has criticized the Turkish intervention and called for peace talks to resolve the crisis. Libya's neighbor, Egypt, has been one of the countries supporting the Libyan National Army. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has made it clear he backs Khalifa Haftar's fight against terrorism in his border country.
The Eastern Mediterranean and Middle East, where we are, is an important area. The big powers now believe that the instability in places like Libya will destabilize the whole region. So there's an understanding and willingness to find a peaceful solution. There might be an escalation between the Libyan National Army and the other side, but what I see is that as it gets tougher, the solution will be nearer. We are working towards peace. It's in our interest for Libya to be stable. It's in our interest to have a legitimate government in Libya, and it's also in our interest for Libya to be united.
Going into 2020, events are leading into a full war scenario inside Libya, but hope still remains with the Berlin Conference.
Fayez Sarraj and the National Court's continuous demands for foreign intervention is prolonging the conflict and create a bloodbath, as UN envoy Ghassan Salama said. Turkey has supported terrorist groups in Syria and Yemen. Doing the same in Libya will destroy any hopes of a peaceful solution.
2020 could be a pivotal year for Libya. The failure to achieve peace could lead to an all-out war, and this could break the country in two, East and West Libya. Yes, Hakim, CGTN, Cairo.
Let's return to Somalia, our headline story today, where the country continues to deal with the aftermath of Saturday's bomb blast. A Turkish military plane has arrived in Somalia to assist the country following Saturday's bombing. At least 79 people were killed after a car bomb exploded in the capital, Mogadishu. 2 Turkish nationals were among the casualties. The death toll is expected to rise, with at least 149 people injured in the blast. No group has claimed responsibility for that attack. Well, let's cross over now to Mogadishu and hear the latest on that development. Mohammed Kahia Mahmoud is a journalist based in Mogadishu. He's joining us live from there. Mohammed, what is the latest situation in Mogadishu? Has the death toll risen overnight? What do we know?
Well, there's not much development on the number of deaths. It still stands at 79 according to Ministry of Health and Social Service, but there have been beehive of activities going on in the city today due to the number of injuries across various hospitals, and also the funeral and burial of those who died in the attack. So there is, as you mentioned, a Turkish Air Force plane with a number of doctors which jetted in the country last night, and there are almost 10, more than 12 people are expected, who are in critical condition, expected to be lifted to Turkey for further medical attention. Also, the Prime Minister of the Federal Republic of Somalia have been visiting various hospitals with the senior government officials, including the Mayor of Mogadishu and the Minister of Internal Security, to see what the government can do to help those who are injured, but their injuries are not life-threatening, to see how to get government support for such kind of citizens.
Mohammed, the President said he would ask Cabinet for emergency support. Has this been done, and what kind of support is currently being received from the government?
Yes, with the coordination from the Office of the Prime Minister of Somalia, a national emergency response committee was established, including cabinet members and senior government officials, and an emergency center was established with the help from volunteer youth groups. And the Prime Minister just visited some few hours ago the center, which documents the number of people affected in the attack, and try to provide assistance to families. But also a spokesman from the Ministry of Information has just confirmed that the government will stand in for the expenses of the families affected by the attack, meaning the medical bill, those who are inside the country.
Mohammed, do we know who is responsible for this attack? Has any group taken responsibility for yesterday's attack?
Well, up to now, we don't have any group or potential group to claim the responsibility for this attack. But a statement from the government top officials in the country, including the President and the Prime Minister, the Minister for Interior, all of them are pointing fingers to the armed group Al-Shabaab, which is fighting in the country to topple the government. We have been trying to monitor the online media affiliated to the group to see if there was any trace, but we could not find it. But it's very, sometimes people say that clear that such kind of attacks is conducted by the armed group Al-Shabaab in the country. So experts say when there is sometimes huge casualties, the group tries to not to claim the responsibility to avoid a public reaction.
All right, Mohammed Kahiye Mohamud, a journalist based in Mogadishu, joining us there with the very latest on Somalia. Thank you. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Algeria's President Abdelmadjid Tebboune names a new prime minister. And over 6,000 families displaced by floods in Western Kenya.
Data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Algeria's President Abdelmadjid Tebboune has named a university professor and former diplomat as the country's new prime minister. Abdelaziz Gerard, who is 65 years old, served in the administration of former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. He left after being sidelined. The appointment comes amid ongoing massive protests in the North African nation over meddling by the military.
In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, I was received by Mr. President, who ordered the formation of the government. I thank him deeply for his trust. We are confronted by a big challenge in order to regain the trust of our society. We are also faced with economic and social challenges. We should work together with the country's caliber, with the country's components, and with all men and women and all our citizens in order to get through this difficult phase. I am confident that the President's program will enable us to work for the best national interests.
Well, let's turn to Kenya, where the government is urging residents of the western city of Kisumu to move to rescue centers as flooding continues. Over 6,000 families are already affected. The floods follow a second wave of heavy rains that began days to Christmas Day. East Africa is experiencing above normal rainfall that are linked to the Indian Ocean being warmer than usual. According to Save the Children agency, 1,200 people have died across East and Southern Africa as a result of the floods.
Over 6,000 families has been affected, and currently the county government has organized for evacuation center, which is at Kasagam Secondary School. And we urge the people who are seriously affected to go to the area. They'll get every provision that the government is giving. They're giving food, they're giving shelter, they're giving clothing. So let us not wait till we get stuck.
Zimbabwe will spend around $133 million next year on subsidies for maize meal as it seeks to keep prices of the country's staple food affordable. This comes as the Southern African nation grapples with food shortages and spiraling inflation. Finance Minister Ntuli Nkube told the state-owned television ZBC News that the government is considering subsidizing other goods as well. Zimbabwe's population is enduring the worst economic crisis in a decade, and a severe drought has left millions facing hunger. Well, Gideon Jitanga, a regional political economist at PESA, is joining us now from Johannesburg with some insights on the Zimbabwean situation. PESA is a regional economic think tank based in Southern Africa. Mr. Jitanga, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. Can Zimbabwe afford the subsidies they need to keep food prices down, and how will they finance this?
So the finances and the general economic situation is in a very bad state, as you have said. I'm not sure where the government will get the money to cover the subsidies, but it's a necessary move. That's what they are faced with. The population has to survive. What we know is that the country is facing extremely high inflation that is wiping away immediately the savings of the ordinary citizens. The ordinary citizens cannot afford to buy basic commodities because much of these commodities are imported. They are not available in the country. Production has collapsed. So the majority of Zimbabweans who do not earn anything much because their incomes are pegged to the local currency, which is really so much down compared to the value of the US dollar, which is informally circulating in the market, find it difficult to survive. But also the raw populations, the majority of whom are very unemployed, do not have means. So I wonder where the government will get the money, considering that they adopted austerity 2 years into President Mnangagwa's tenure to try and save, at the same time stabilize the macroeconomic situation. But that is also failing. I think that the only way for the country is to depend mostly on humanitarian aid to feed the Zimbabwean population.
Right, so 133 million for subsidies for maize meal, that is a lot of money, and that spells that the country is in dire straits. So how bad is the food situation in the country exactly?
We know that more than half the Zimbabwean population is actually vulnerable and exposed to food shortages. They can't access basic needs. And we are talking about very basic needs here, like maize or maize meal, which is the staple in Zimbabwe. Of this half of the population, about 5 million are people in the rural areas. We also understand that about 2 million of this population are people who live in urban areas. So you have a situation where people, including those who are in urban areas, are facing potential starvation. But also linked to this, we have potential shortages in basics such as water. There's a likelihood of malnutrition and malnutrition-linked diseases. So this is an extremely dire situation. It's not only starvation, it's the diseases that are linked to that. We have young girls who are exposed to all kinds of diseases because they get involved into prostitution and other practices to try and raise money which they don't have to put food on the table. So it's a very bad situation that is affecting the whole country and all the communities beyond the rural-urban divide.
Well, Zimbabwe has had decades of economic decline, and Zimbabwe recently introduced a new currency and has been actively seeking investors. Some residents have been quoted saying, though, that the economic situation now is worse than when President Mnangagwa took over. Is that the case, or is the president's reform plan bearing fruit?
Unfortunately, I have to say yes, and add that for some of us who regularly visit Zimbabwe, you don't get a sense that the government understands the agents and has a solid program or action plan to deal with the broader and bigger context of the economic malaise that characterized former President Mugabe's rule. So, in spite of the fact that the bad economic situation was the justification for the coming in of the new administration, they do not look like they have a plan or a solution to the crisis. In fact, the crisis has deepened. A shortage of foreign currency, spiraling inflation. I know that at present, month-on-month inflation is soaring towards 39%, and this is an underestimation because the figures, the economic data in Zimbabwe has been subverted after the Minister of Finance refused to publicly share the data for the last quarter of the year. So the situation is not promising. There is lack of optimism. The whole country is politically and economically insecure. There isn't that confidence that is needed to get investors to bring in money to Zimbabwe. But there's also a worrying pattern,
right,
where even those who are willing to invest in Zimbabwe look like they must be linked to the administration or elites who are close to the administration for them to access the Zimbabwean market. So I would think that the mantra that Zimbabwe is open for business has not been reflected in practical action where the country is basically open and investors can come from anywhere and participate in the country. The other thing is that there isn't such a strategy that incentivizes and allows young Zimbabweans to thrive as entrepreneurs, to participate. If we were to consider in agriculture, these are people who were born in this environment, who understand Zimbabwean agriculture, grew up in peasant farming, and can innovate and participate in agriculture.
Gideon Chitanga joining us there from Johannesburg on the situation in Zimbabwe. Well, across the border in Zambia, President Edgar Lungu and his cabinet will take a salary cut. This is part of measures to reduce the impact of a 115% power hike announced on Friday. The Southern African country is experiencing a severe power shortage after a drought-induced drop in water levels at its hydropower plants.
President Edgar Lungu has ordered a reduction of between 15 and 20% in his and other senior government officials' salaries in the wake of the power tariff hike, which kicks in on January 1st. His gesture is seen as an attempt to try and pacify public anger over the increase, which has also been accompanied by a hike in the price of fuel due to a depreciation in the value of the Zambian kwacha. Like its southern neighbor Zimbabwe, Zambia is heavily reliant on hydropower and has been plunged into crisis due to a severe drought that has cut generation capacity, leading to rolling power cuts of up to 15 hours per day. Saddled with debt and facing viability problems, Zambia's power utility, ZESCO, has been unable to expand its energy infrastructure on its own and has also failed to attract new investors due to the fact that it's been charging sub-economic tariffs, something it sought to address with this latest adjustment. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Now, in Africa, many women wear their hair extensions despite the high cost. One woman has, however, found an affordable solution while also offering an environmentally friendly hair product. Let's take a look.
Natengeneza makonge kuwa nywele za kusukia. Tangu mwanzo nikiwa mtoto nilikuwa nadhani watu wanatumia makonge kusuka. Venye nimegrow up kufika 15 years, nika realize kwamba hawatumii makonge, wanatumia nywele. Wengine wanasema nywele za punda. Haikati nywele. Ukipata hizi synthetic, unapata nywele imekatika hivi. Na makonge haikati, ili hali inafanya nywele ina grow haraka. Kitu ya pili, hii nywele ya makonge nikinyeshewa hata na mvua ama nishtukanie nimemwagiwa maji nikioga, hainuki. Na ile synthetic ukishaweka maji inanuka.
Ukitumia hii sisal inatoa neat na ni smart, inakaa kwa muda mrefu, lakini ukitumia hiyo ingine inaharibika haraka. Alafu ukitoa unarusha, lakini ukitoa uwezi ukarusha, unaweza rudia hata mara 3, mara 4 ndio urushe.
Chagua hizi juu nikishukia sisikii uchungu. Hizi haziumizi, alafu zinakaa for long bila kuharibika, alafu zinakaa smart. Alafu then unaweza shukia several, unaweza shukia utoe, tena ushukie style ingine.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Sudan's transitional government removed fuel subsidies gradually in 2020. And the Chinese-supported satellite television project that is connecting rural communities in Malawi to the world.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise. And Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN. Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Sudan's transitional government plans to remove fuel subsidies gradually in 2020 and double public sector salaries. According to the country's finance minister, Ibrahim El-Badawi, these measures are meant to ease the impact of rising inflation. The new civilian government is trying, in partnership with donors, to launch a series of economic and political reforms after veteran ruler Omar al-Bashir was ousted in April. Sudan has been in crisis since losing two-thirds of its oil production after the secession of South Sudan in 2011. However, the finance minister has not disclosed how next year's budget will be funded, nor the government's forecast for revenue and expenditure. A satellite television project seeking to connect 500 rural communities in Malawi is opening rural masses to the world. The project, implemented with assistance from China, is helping Malawi's rural masses learn new farming techniques. Here's CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy.
The living room is silent. Attention focused on a satellite TV program broadcast from China. This family is not watching a televised drama series. They are learning new techniques of rice farming from China in their living room. Sadrak Venad, a farmer from Piliranjuzi village in Malawi's traditional authority Masumbukunda, is one among thousands of low-income Malawians benefiting from China's satellite TV connectivity project.
I am happy because now I am able to watch and learn about different cultures across the world, something I never thought would come my way in this life.
This rural family now enjoys the full benefits of the digital world as China and Malawi enhance their shared pursuit of bilateral cooperation. The Malawi Satellite TV project is part of a forum on China-Africa Cooperation Initiative that aimed to provide satellite TV reception to 10,000 African villages. Maxon Poko is another resident of Pirilanjuzi village enjoying the China Satellite TV project for the first time.
In the first time, when I wasn't got this one, my children were playing with something which is harmful to them. But upon using Star Times, my children do mostly enjoy very much.
In this village, one cannot fail to notice TV satellite dishes mounted on rooftops, signaling clear access to information for villagers. According to a 2014 survey by the National Statistical Office, only 11% of Malawi's households have working television sets. The Chinese government, through the project, has donated 500 solar-powered digital TV sets, fully integrated with decoders, 1,000 solar-powered projectors, and 10,000 digital decoder sets. China's support to Malawi's rural poor aims at bringing development to the country's rural masses through rural growth centers.
this has boosted the world view of people in the villages, because you know that the people in the remote areas, in most cases, they are denied of access, to information. But with this, the project that government has rolled out through aid from China, we have been able to reach out to so many people.
The Malawi Satellite TV project is being implemented by China's Star Times Group, enabling locals to watch at least 21 TV channels at affordable cost. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Pirilan Joseph Village, Malawi.
The year 2019 comes to an end in just about 3 days. Here's CGTN's Penina Karibe exploring some of the game changers across the continent this year.
From CEOs to tech gurus, these African men and women definitely had 2019 at their feet. Kickstarting this list is Africa's youngest leader. Catapulted into office in April 2018, Abiy Ahmed has made a huge splash at home and internationally this year, including a Nobel Peace Prize. In just 20 months so far, Abiy has made peace with Eritrea, released about 60,000 political prisoners, calmed ethnic tensions, signed multi-million-dollar infrastructure deals, started liberalizing the economy, persuaded diaspora Ethiopians to contribute about $2.4 million to a trust fund, filled his cabinet with women, diffused a potential military coup by doing press-ups with soldiers, and the list goes on. On his part, Eliud Kipchoge was simply in a league of his own in 2019. The Kenyan Olympic champion became the first athlete to run a marathon in less than 2 hours. The historic 1.59 challenge saw a peak viewing figure of over 779,000 consecutive live streams. Kipchoge is also the 2019 Athlete of the Year. Let's talk movies now. Nigeria's leading lady, Genevieve Nnaji, was a force to reckon with this year. With her directorial debut, Lionheart, 2019 saw Nnaji contribute immensely to Nigeria's multi-billion-dollar movie industry. The film is currently the first original film from Nigeria screening to Netflix subscribers across the world. Ntuli Nkube may not have realized quite what he was letting himself in for when he took the job of Zimbabwe's finance minister in September last year. But fast forward to today, Nkube has cut spending. He's laid out policies designed to wean Zimbabwe off the US dollar and restore monetary sovereignty. Well, with that in mind, here's a stellar collection of other African personalities, from bankers, entrepreneurs to innovators, who put Africa on the global map this year.
The year has also seen growing relations between Africa and China. CGTN's Robert Nagila sat down with China's ambassador to Kenya, Wu Peng, for a wide-ranging conversation looking back at the year that was and what Africa can look forward to from its largest trading partner and investor, China, in 2020.
As 2019 comes to an end, I'm joined by the Chinese ambassador to Kenya, His Excellency Wu Peng. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. We do appreciate it.
You are welcome.
Your Excellency, now I'll start off by asking, how would you describe China's relationship with Kenya at this particular moment?
China and Kenya are good brothers, not only just a development partner. Our relationship in recent years has developed by leaps and bounds. Kenya is an active partner in Belt and Road cooperation, and the Standard Gauge Railway from Mombasa to Nairobi is a sweet fruit of our two countries' cooperation. As Chinese President Xi Jinping emphasized in his meeting with President Uhuru Kenyatta, our bilateral relations are strategic and high level. Since 2015, China has been Kenya's largest trade partner and Kenya's major source of foreign direct investment. Currently, there are over 400 Chinese companies operating in Kenya, creating roughly 130,000 jobs for Kenyans. Nowadays, Kenya has become a favorable tourist destination in Africa of Chinese people. And studying in China has become a popular trend among Kenya young generation. The two people's friendship enjoys solid foundation.
Your Excellency, could you give us your recollections of major achievements in 2019 between China and Kenya?
Politically, His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta successfully visited China again this year for the second International Forum on Belt and Road Cooperation. Mr. Yang Jiechi, as President Xi Jinping's special representative, visited Kenya, and Mr. Wang Yong, as special envoy, attended the launching ceremony of SGR Phase 2A freight service in Nairobi. The Garissa Power Station, the largest solar power station in East Africa, was also completed and put into operation. The Nairobi Airport Expressway, the first BOT project with Chinese investment, was officially put into construction. It shows that we are actively working together with Kenya people to achieve the Big Four agenda and the Vision 2013. From January to September 2019, Kenya registered about $105 million worth of exports to China, with a year-on-year increase of about 57%. That is a huge increase. Exports of fresh flowers has grown substantially. Now I'm very glad to tell you that from January 1st to 2020, the tariff of Kenya frozen avocado has been reduced from 30% to just 7%.
Your Excellency, looking forward to 2020, what trade and cultural opportunities are there for African countries in China in 2020?
I must emphasize that China's door of reform and opening up will keep opening further. In 2020, China will host the third China International Import Expo, CIIE. As China is currently making efforts to transform from a big trade country to a powerful trade country, that means it's put more emphasis on enlarging imports. The Chinese people's increasing demand for high quality, pollution-free and green products actually means good business opportunity for African countries.
And finally, Your Excellency, how would you describe China's involvement in Africa in 2019, and what can we expect in 2020?
Most important, let me put it into this way. We follow the principle advocated by our President Xi Jinping, the principle of pursuing the greater good and shared interests, and strengthen solidarity and cooperation with African countries. In this year to 2019, the coordinators meeting on the implementation of the follow-up actions of the FOCAC Beijing Summit was successfully held in Beijing. In 2020, we'll continue to support the legitimate aspiration of African countries and advance our shared interests. We should work harder to increase Africa exports to China, to improve the trade structure further between China and Africa. And the Chinese side also shall encourage transform of Chinese enterprises operating in Africa from just a constructor to investors. Meanwhile, we should educate Chinese people in Africa to engage more closely with local community and strictly follow the laws and regulations at host countries.
Your Excellency, it's been an absolute pleasure. On behalf of everyone at CGTN Africa, I'd like to wish you and the embassy staff a happy 2020 and a prosperous new year. Thank you very much.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. Egypt creates the world's largest coffee cup portrait with the Tutankhamun.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Tutankhamun is one of Egypt's most well-known kings. Now, thanks to him, the country has broken a Guinness World Record. Tut Coffee created the world's largest coffee portrait. CGTN's Ashtatal has more.
65 kilos of coffee, 1,000 liters of milk. These are a few ingredients you need to break a Guinness World Record. Add some plastic cups, coffee, and a dedicated team, you'll get the world's largest coffee portrait.
Today we broke the record with 7,260 cups of coffee to make the portrait of a mask of Tutankhamun, which is really wonderful.
The event took place at the Grand Egyptian Museum. The Tut Coffee Company spent 12 hours on the feat. The museum will open next year and will host treasured items from Tutankhamun's tomb.
We could not find something better than coffee to welcome everyone. We also could not find any better inspiration than Tutankhamun for a coffee portrait. These will remind the world that the Egyptian civilization is the greatest and that we are waiting for you.
But one thing remained in order for King Tut to get written into another chapter of history.
The portrait belongs to King Tutankhamun. All of these requirements are met. But one of the requirements is that all coffee cups be distributed to those who attended or donated to charity.
The coffee was distributed among attendees. Workers were also given a sip of the historic coffee. Astatal, CGTN.
Let's start your sport with some rugby news. Sia Kolisi has had